on boundaries. So boundaries, I feel like, is kind of a hot topic lately. I feel like I hear a lot of people talk about boundaries, and a lot of the information circulating, at least just from random people talking about this boundary that they put in place, I think is a little bit misconstrued as far as, yes, we need boundaries, but sometimes we over boundary and sometimes we under boundary. Sometimes we don't put in any boundaries and sometimes we put in way too many boundaries, and we kind of swing back and forth on this pendulum. Like, oh, I put in too much, I'm going to take them away, or I'm not doing enough, so then I'm going to overdo it. And we don't really find the middle of the pendulum swing where we actually feel really good about it, and it's good for us and it's good for others. And my belief is that when something is good for me, it is good for the world. It is good for my community. It is good for my family. It is good for my partnership. And so all of those things can be good for everybody involved, and boundaries can be exactly the same way. So I want to talk for a minute about boundaries. Back in the day when I was first doing this work, first doing life coaching work, this is like circa 2019. Boundaries was something that we spoke about then as well. I actually don't even remember what I learned about boundaries back then, but I remember feeling a little bit murky about it. Like I wasn't super clear on how to set them or what to do about them or anything. But I did know that through that how I thought about it really mattered. And then I needed to do some cleaning up about it. And I also remember that it had to do with me and not somebody else. When before I kind of thought a boundary was like, how can I change them? How can I stop them from doing this thing that I don't want them to do anymore by instilling a boundary to kind of like control or coerce or manipulate. And I wasn't thinking that logically in my mind, but that's kind of what I got the gist of boundaries being. I'm also naturally a people pleaser. I would say that I'm not anymore, but for years I really was. And so that kind of goes to the under boundary, right? I'm going to say yes to something that feels like a no to me, or I'm going to take on the discomfort of others so that I'm holding the discomfort still, hoping that everybody else will feel comfortable around me. So people pleasing can get murky with boundaries as well. But here is what I believe about boundaries now. The most important boundary work is the work that we do inside first before we decide what the boundary is. Because the most important work is actually the energy in which we created the boundary. The emotion that I was feeling as I made that decision. I think that boundaries are healthy. It's like me and I have this house and I have this like garden and I have this lawn and then I have a fence all the way around my lawn, and this is mine and this is somebody else's. And I think they're really important and healthy to have, but I think again, they can get really murky, and they get murky based on, is my energy really clean around this as I'm creating it, or is it not? Because if it's not, again, I'm going to go to like under boundarying or over boundarying, and that's really hard to get in the center. So the energy matters most because of the principle, we reap what we sow. One of my favorite mentors, Amber Smith, says it like this: what is planted in fear grows in fear. We can't plant something and expect a different result. I don't plant a pumpkin seed and then all of a sudden I have a watermelon. That's just not how it works. If I planted it in the soil of fear and the soil of shame, and those are very highly connected to each other, interconnected, then it's going to plant more fear or plant more shame. I'm going to give you a couple examples from my own life and you can see what I mean by this, but I would offer that the work to do is to shift our energy and then decide what the boundary is, not try and figure out a boundary from this energy that I'm feeling right now. So a few that come up for me, one is screens, especially video games. It's summer right now. I'm trying to figure out like how much do we do? How much do we not do? How do we manage and mitigate this so we're also doing other things? I recognize that there is negative impacts of screens, absolutely. But I also think there's so many positive impacts of it. And I think that the messages that are most common are messages on both sides of the spectrum. They're very like apathetic, just let your kids do what you want, or super controlling and fear-based. And I think it's one thing to read research that's going to help us be more empowered. But I think if what we are reading is leading us to feel shame or fear, we are not going to be able to create the boundary that we want to, and it's only going to create more shame and fear. And screens is one of those. For me, school, not for me personally, but for my kids, we've always kind of gone back and forth between like different kinds of homeschooling. But one of my kiddos has been doing a little bit more of the government curriculum and a little less of open schooling like we did before. And sometimes it's been a struggle for them. And sometimes they found themselves reading a lot or kind of doing other things that aren't actually the schoolwork that needs to be done, what we would call procrastination. And I noticed myself really move into both the shame and the fear. What is their future going to be like? What does this mean? How are they going to fail all their classes? And when I'm in that energy, I usually respond with both shame and fear. And the boundaries that I set are never healthy boundaries. or it's not set in the right energy, and so it's not effective. Sexuality, pornography and sexuality, masturbation, things like that we don't love to talk about openly, those can be tricky topics when we are talking to our kids about them, because we bring in our own past and our own shame and our own fear, especially if we grew up in a home where it was not talked about it a lot, or if you grew up in a conservative Christian home and it was very strict. And that kind of culture can lead to more shame and fear within me often. And I'm still kind of dealing with that and then trying to respond to teach my kids healthy sexuality. How do I teach them so that they can decide for themselves what they believe and what they feel, and really I live into this principle of they have a lot of wisdom inside of them. They have answers inside of them. And I'm not here just to kind of manipulate and coerce and mold them, but I'm here to listen and to understand. And yes, I can be a guide, but I want them to come up with their own answers for themselves. Can come up a lot in sexuality and anything to do with bodies, really, body image, all of that. It was really fascinating to go to different countries and different cultures and see how different people responded to even just the idea of naked body or anatomy, physical anatomy versus North American culture. So I'm not going to get into more of that specifically, but I will talk about one other topic is mental health. That sometimes when we're talking about anxiety or depression or mental illnesses or diagnoses, that can be an area where there's a lot of negative stigma, and we can be really fear-based about that. What is their future going to be like again? And that fear and that shame go hand in hand, and it can be really tricky to try and navigate. So what I'm offering is that it's shifting our energy first. Again, going back to the last episode, or was it 2 episodes ago, where I was talking about the analogy of the 2 rooms. If you have not watched that, go back and watch the analogy of the 2 rooms. Because you're going to probably be thinking, but this is actually a problem, and I actually need an answer. And what is my answer? I felt that way a lot, but I want to offer that the answers come to you from a different energy space. The boundary will come to you in a different energy space. And so I would invite you to get into your body and to do the work within your mind, within your heart, within your feelings, your inner work first, and then choose the boundary. And that is going to be the most helpful and the most healthy boundary to make, because you're going to find that it will feel good for you and it will feel good for others. Sometimes good for others doesn't always look like they're really happy about it. They're really jazzed. It can be good for them in a way that doesn't necessarily look like it might be good for them, right? If somebody's screaming and yelling and swearing at me, I can stand there and just take it, or I can pause and say something like, I'm not going to stand here in this kind of a conversation, but I'll talk to you about it later when you're feeling differently. And then I can walk out of the room. In that moment, they might be feeling really mad. They might be feeling really angry, and that might be feeling really uncomfortable. But was that better for them? And was that better for me? Yes, than me staying in that conversation. And so that's just a really simple, silly little example, but I want to offer that something that is good for you is also going to be good for others, if it truly is good for you. I want to share this quote by Jack Kornfield. Compassion is not foolish. It doesn't just go along with what others say so they don't feel bad. There is a yes in compassion. And there is also a no, said with the same courage of heart. Buddhists call this the fierce sword of compassion. That is what a boundary is. It will feel so good. It might be uncomfortable, but you will know that it is the right one. And it might be uncomfortable for others, but they will also know that it's the right one. And that I will offer this as a unique and individual thing. Nobody else knows your child and your situation and what's best for you and for them. And this doesn't just have to do with kids. Obviously, this is boundaries in any relationship, in any way or arena of our life. But I want to offer that the work is to shift our energy first and then decide what the boundary is. And therefore, the boundary will become much more effective because you reap what you sow. Whatever you're going to plant, if you're planting it with compassion, it's going to grow compassion. If you're planting it with this feeling of expansion and growth and maybe some discomfort, it can breed even more of that growth, more of that expansion. And that's good for us and good for the world. So go ahead and try out some boundaries. And hopefully this was helpful for you in helping you decide what you're going to do this summer with your kids and screens and video games, or whatever other boundary you're trying to resolve right now. Thanks for being here. If you are enjoying these episodes, I would love for you to follow, subscribe, like, share, do all those things so that it can get more out into the world, more out into the algorithm, and join me in this shame-free movement.